Would you be the jerk for joking around and getting a teacher fired? We'll get to that in a bit, but first, am I the jerk for telling my late dad's in-laws that their granddaughter is not my responsibility? I'm 19-year-old male, and my younger sister Kala, 15-year-old female, lives with me. Our dad and his wife died 3 months ago. Mine and Kala's mom died when we were younger. Dad and his wife had been married for 4 years. His wife had a daughter, Lacey, who is now 5. When CPS became involved because both were left orphans, I stepped up to take care of my sister. I was already working full-time since I skipped college, and I just about had what I needed to take care of my sister. They asked me about Lacey, and I told them I just wanted to take my sister. Lacey was placed with her grandparents, my dad's in-laws. They became aware of the fact that Kala came to live with me, and that I've been offered the chance to take their granddaughter and refused. Once they learned this, they asked me why and then pestered me about it for weeks. Finally, they told me that they were older and she could use as much family as possible and that she misses Kala. She wouldn't remember me. I asked Kala if she wanted to see her and she said, not really. So I told them we weren't interested in staying in their granddaughter's life. They told me she's our little sister, that my dad would have wanted for us to stick together. I told them I didn't care what my dad wanted. They said not to punish a child for the sins of my parent. I blocked them and continued on with things until they saw me out on social media via one of their older grandkids and told me that I should be ashamed of myself and their granddaughter deserves to be with her siblings and be raised by me since I'm young, fit, and healthy and could run around after her like they can't and will be around a lot longer than them. I replied once that their granddaughter is not my responsibility and that I wanted them to leave me and my sister alone because we have no reason to be in touch ever again. That wasn't the end, and they called me selfish and cruel a few times via another account, so I had to set my account to private to stop them. Am I the jerk? If you have no attachment to them, you can't be forced into this, especially not such a burden as taking care of another person. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you enjoy getting to decide whether or not all these people here are jerks, why not hit that subscribe button down below? That said, our next story is, am I the jerk for not sharing some of my sunscreen with my boyfriend? My boyfriend, 24-year-old male, and I, 22-year-old male, went to the beach on 12/25. As is common here, it happened to be a sunny day, so you could get a sunburn if you didn't take some self-care measures. Both my parents are dermatologists, so my siblings and I are very aware of the importance of protecting your skin from sunburn and having a proper skincare routine. My boyfriend, on the other hand, doesn't give a crap about his skin. No matter how much my parents have tried to convince him to wear sunscreen, he has never done it. When we got to the beach, I started putting on my sunscreen and he asked me to share some with him, but I refused to share since it wouldn't make sense to take care of your skin just once because he isn't doing it again. Plus, my sunscreen is the one I wear on a daily basis. It's meant to be personal. He got mad at me. I told him to wear a hoodie so he could minimize sunburns, but he refused. Long story short, he's got sunburns. My boyfriend's skin was so red and felt hot to the touch, and it was painful for him. He called me a jerk for not sharing with him. He says he hasn't forgiven me yet because it hurts and the sunburn hasn't faded. My dad has seen him to get sunburn relief. My dad calls me the jerk because sharing some with him does cost nothing, but my mom says that this is a lesson for my boyfriend since this is his own fault. My mom's gifted him a sunscreen, but he decides not to use it. Are they the jerk for not sharing? I mean, it's not very expensive. This next story is, am I the jerk for telling my son's teacher to speak to me, not my girlfriend? This happened a few weeks ago, but the situation was brought up again recently. I, 28-year-old male, have a son, Nathan, 6-year-old male. I'm his sole parent because his mother lost the custody battle. His school was made aware of this when I removed his mother's details from their system, and his current teacher for grade 1 hasn't met my ex. Due to the nature of the custody battle, his teacher doesn't know about my ex for safety reasons, as she's been barred from coming to the school to get him. Basically, she knows that if she ever sees me with a woman, it is definitely not my ex. His school has parent-teacher meetings twice a year, once before the Christmas break and another at the end of the academic year. I've been dating my girlfriend Venus, 24-year-old female, for the past 8 months, and she has an amazing relationship with my son. He likes her a lot, and he asked me if she could come with me to the parent-teacher conference because he wanted her to hear that he's doing well at school. My son used to struggle with English as his mother tongue is Spanish. My Spanish is okay, but Venus is fluent, so she helped him improve his English by tutoring him. At the meeting, I noticed that the teacher was only speaking to Venus. She was making eye contact with her and only directing conversations to her. I found this annoying because, although I know most primary parents are women, the teacher is well aware that I'm Nathan's sole parent. Venus kept redirecting the conversation to me, and I did ask a few questions, but the teacher would speak to me for a few seconds and then go back to speaking to Venus only. Eventually, I said, "I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm Nathan's father and I'd appreciate it if you spoke to me." The teacher seemed taken aback and irritated, but she apologized and spoke to me for the rest of the meeting. I told my brother-in-law, sister's husband, about what happened, and he thinks I overreacted. He said that while he does find it annoying when teachers only speak to my sister at meetings, he understands it's not out of malice, but just a force of habit, since mothers tend to be more involved than fathers. He also said that it was my fault for bringing Venus along to the meeting. He thinks it was a jerk move for me to interrupt the teacher and make her feel like she did something wrong for something that was most likely not malicious. It was brought up again at Christmas because Venus spent it with my family, and my mother asked Venus if she had Nathan's inhaler, and my brother-in-law interrupted and said, "Careful, Mom's name. Mark might freak out now." I'd like to put this situation to rest. Am I the jerk? OP brought Venus along because it was supporting their kid. Even if the teacher needed a reminder, after being reminded they should have talked to the actual parent. And this brother-in-law just seems weirdly petty. This next story is, am I the jerk for not doing the activity my husband picked on vacation, even though he did the one I wanted? My husband and I recently went on a long overdue vacation to a tropical island. We stayed at an all-inclusive resort, but we also wanted to get out and actually explore the island as well. So we decided that each of us would pick an activity to do that would get us off the resort for a day. I picked a hike that would bring us up into the mountainous interior of the island and through some rainforests. My husband's not a big hiker, but he agreed to do it with me. My husband narrowed his choices down to two options: a catamaran trip to go snorkeling and dune buggy riding. I get horrible motion sickness. We had some mild turbulence on our flight to the island, and even with Dramamine I took before we took off, I still got nauseous and lightheaded. I told my husband that both of the ideas he picked are things that I know for a fact would make me motion sick. He told me that it probably wouldn't be that bad, but I told him that I know my body and I know without a doubt that both of those activities would make me sick. I asked him if there were any other activities that he was interested in, but he said that those two were the only ones that piqued his interest. He eventually agreed to go on the hiking trip first, and then we can figure out the activity that he wants to do. While on our hike, we started talking with another couple that was also staying at our resort. They'd been there a couple of times before, and my husband asked if they'd done either of the activities that he wanted to do. They had done both and said that they were both a lot of fun. But the wife did say that the catamaran trip was pretty rough at times, and a couple of people on their trip got seasick. She also said that the dune buggy was fun because you get to drive it yourself, but it's mostly on dirt tracks that can get pretty bumpy. From the way she described it, I knew that if I did either of those things, I would get sick. When we got back from the hike, I told my husband that I don't want to do either of the activities he wants to do, and asked again if he can please pick something else for us to do. He said those were the only two things he liked, and if I don't want to do them, we won't because he doesn't want to go alone. I knew he was upset because he was really excited talking about both the things he wanted to do, and after I told him I wouldn't do them, his demeanor definitely changed. I wouldn't say he was sulking, but he was definitely less animated and not his usual fun self. He pretty much spent the rest of our trip just sitting around the pool doing nothing. I tried to get him to do things with me, like get a massage, but he told me to just go do that myself. When he didn't change his attitude, I finally asked him what was up, and he told me that he went outside of his comfort zone to go on a hike with me, but I wouldn't do the same for him. I told him that hiking doesn't make him sick, so that's a big difference, but he told me I could have at least tried one of them. Even if Opie was pretty certain it would make them sick, should they have just given it a try just to see? Our next story is, am I the jerk for not spending this Christmas in the hospital with my daughter? I'm 39-year-old female. My daughter, 16-year-old female, has had a sensitive stomach ever since she was a kid. There are certain foods that'll upset her stomach to the point where she's unable to stop throwing up. We've seen countless doctors, but so far nobody's been able to give us a clear answer. The only advice we keep getting is to identify all the trigger foods and cut them from her diet. We have a pretty good idea of what those foods are: soda and other carbonated drinks, chips, Cheetos, and other similar processed snacks, anything oily or fried, and most sweets. Unfortunately, this is exactly the kind of stuff my daughter loves to eat the most, and as horrible as she feels after she has them, she still refuses to cut them out of her diet, which in turn led to her spending a lot of time in the hospital during the past few years. When she was little, it was easier to keep all these foods away from her because I simply wouldn't buy them. But now that she's older, I can't always be there to check what she eats. She eats the greasy pizza at her school's cafeteria. She trades her lunch with her classmates. She goes out with her friends and stops to eat at a KFC and so on. And it always ends with her in the ER crying and shaking because she can't stop throwing up. This was the case on this Christmas Eve as well, when our whole family gathered at our place. And of course, among the many dishes at our Christmas table were some of her main trigger foods, like chips, soda, chocolate, and sweets. Now mind you, these were far from the only foods available to her. We also had a variety of home-cooked, traditional dishes on the table, with ingredients that don't upset her stomach, like vegetables, meat, dairy, etc. All of them delicious and well-seasoned. My daughter herself says she really likes most of these dishes. Despite this, my daughter chose to eat nothing but her trigger foods. I reminded her that they'd make her feel awful, but she said she didn't care, because Christmas is only once a year and she just wants to live a little. Well, this ended up with her violently throwing up in the ER a few hours later. She had to be hospitalized for a few days and only just got out of the hospital a few hours ago. And unlike all the previous times when something like this happened, this time, I chose to spend my Christmas relaxing at home with the rest of our family, and not in the hospital by my daughter's side. I kept in touch with her through calls and texts, and told her that if she needed anything, I would ask a family member to bring it to her, but I made it clear that I would not be visiting her during her stay. And, well, my daughter didn't take this too well. She cried every time we talked on the phone, begged me to come over, told me how horrible I was for abandoning her there all alone and so on. Most of our family didn't take my side in this either, and during the past few days, I got called everything from a little extreme to downright cruel and heartless. Am I the jerk, Reddit? This wasn't some freak accident. I mean, this is a well-known thing where you're saying basically don't do it, and not only do they go ahead and do it, they backflip into it. Our next story is, am I the jerk for not calling mother-in-law to apologize after reviewing the security footage? I'm currently planning a wedding with my incredible fiancé Ryan. Ryan's mom, Kate, doesn't approve to say the least. She's been pretty rude to me over the years, and I know she doesn't like me. Ryan has lowered contact a lot due to this, but I do suck it up sometimes because she is his mom. We decided to invite her for a pre-visit as it's the holiday season. We're in the midst of wedding planning right now and having wedding stuff all over the house. The latest addition is this gorgeous sculpture made of white and pink roses of Cinderella's carriage. The wedding is having a slight princess theme, which Kate claims is cheesy. Ryan and I went out to run some errands and left Kate home, as she said she would cook dinner. When I got home, the carriage was ruined and Kate was acting weird. She said it didn't matter what happened because she knows we're going to think the worst of her and she knows her son is never going to defend her. I lost it and began crying while Ryan demanded to know what happened. Kate's boyfriend insisted it was an accident, but Kate said it didn't matter and she would pack her stuff and leave. At this point, I totally thought she did it on purpose and lost it. I screamed at her and, to be honest, said some hurtful things about her divorce and losing her son. Kate packed her stuff and went. Ryan then suggested we check out the security camera, so we did, and she was spinning and fell. She'd been drinking a lot of wine. In the video, she immediately began crying and said we were never going to believe her. Who would believe this was an accident after our history? And that she had just ruined her relationship with her son. Her boyfriend literally said, "Who cares about their stupid freaking wedding? You're bleeding." When Ryan saw this, he called her and tried to apologize, left a voicemail. He asked me to do the same as it was truly an accident. I said I wasn't ready to apologize as she made it all about herself and didn't even try to tell me the truth. She was willing to ruin her relationship with her son instead of trying to be honest. And she didn't correct her boyfriend when he said stupid freaking wedding. Ryan thinks I need to apologize and said he's disappointed in me. A couple family members are agreeing and saying Kate is the victim here. Our next story is, am I the jerk for not giving mother-in-law her choice of my clothes when hers got wet on Christmas and causing a bunch of family drama? We hosted Christmas on Sunday, and my husband's family is still fighting over this. Mother-in-law is a lot. She does whatever she wants, rules are for other people, not her, and she has never liked me. We just moved into a house with a lake behind it, and mother-in-law found a pair of ice skates at our house. I told her not to go out on the ice, but her husband and my dad both told her that I don't know what I was talking about, and she would be fine. Well, surprise, surprise, she fell through the ice. Thankfully, she wasn't deep at all and could easily get out. Her clothes were soaked and unwearable, so everyone just assumed I'd give her something, which was annoying to be honest. She's never been very nice to me, and my husband has clothes she can wear. I didn't want to give her anything expensive or anything I was attached to. I also didn't want to give her anything at all form-fitting because she's smaller than me and would love to gloat about how they were too big. I offered up a pair of footy pajamas with a bunny tail, warm, meant to be baggy, and I only bought them for Halloween and wouldn't be upset if she lost or ruined them. Mother-in-law refused and demanded I let her go through my drawer. I told her it was the pajamas or she could put her wet clothes back on. At this point, she still refused, and a few other family members began berating me and saying I was extremely cruel. I'm possessive of my clothes, and it was such a personal thing to me. Mother-in-law said she would go home in the wet clothes, which was ridiculous. It was freezing out and she weighs maybe 110 pounds, so she struggles to stay warm anyway. Her husband ended up having a pair of sweats in his car, and her sister gave her a bathrobe she had gotten for Christmas. Mother-in-law refused to speak to me or my husband the rest of the night, and I've been called an evil witch by multiple people. Mother-in-law's mom and sister won't even talk to me. My husband says I was really cruel, and he gets that she isn't easy to deal with, but he's ashamed of how I behaved. I'm not gonna lie, if I put a lot of effort in to make sure that my clothes are the way I like, I'm not gonna want some person I don't like to go rifling through it and pick what they want. Our next story is, am I the jerk for returning my husband's Christmas present? This happened before Christmas, but there's still tension in the house and I just need advice. I, 30-year-old female, have been with my husband, 31-year-old male, for 3 years. We both have children to a previous relationship, mine 8-year-old female and his 6-year-old male. My husband started taking away presents from the Christmas tree for the children that he bought them when the kids misbehaved. I didn't really get a say in it since he was the one that bought the presents for the kids. My daughter's been asking me for months to get her a Switch, so I decided to save a bit and buy her one for Christmas. It was sitting under the tree, then suddenly on Christmas Eve I noticed it was gone. I asked my daughter if she touched it, and she said she didn't. So I decided to turn to my husband, and he said that she swore at him while he was trying to get her ready for bed the night before. So he decided to punish her and take away the present and return it to the store. I started seeing red and demanded he hands me the money back since I was the one that bought that present. He refused, so I grabbed his present that I bought him, a brand new PS5 that he knew he was getting, and returned it. Got my money back, and bought my daughter her Switch back. This started a big argument with my husband and I, and with him calling me childish for doing that. He got his family involved and they spammed my phone telling me to get his present back, but I refused. He's still not talking to me, so Am I the jerk? Your kid swears at you, 100% punish them, but don't take away their Christmas presents to do it. This next story is, am I the jerk for telling my husband he's a bad dad to one of our kids? Me, female 36, and my husband Will, male 35, have 3 kids, Adam, 9-year-old male, Maddie, a 7-year-old female, and Megan, a 6-year-old female. Will's always been into video games, Star Wars, and anime, etc. It's never been my cup of tea, but I think it's healthy that we have separate hobbies and interests, and we have other stuff in common. When we had Adam, Will was super excited to share his interests with him, and bought him Star Wars themed baby grows and toys, etc. For Adam's first Halloween, Will dressed him up as Darth Vader, and it was super cute. It was the same for the girls. I did tell Will that I had no issue with this while the kids were small, but we had to let them develop their own interests. As it turns out, both Adam and Maddie loved playing computer games with their dad and have similar interests, so there's been no issues. The problem now is that as Megan is getting older, she's showing more interest in princesses and Barbies, etc., and finds her dad and siblings' interests boring. Will seems to have an issue with this and keeps trying to encourage Megan towards more of his interests. At Halloween, he seemed annoyed that Megan wanted to dress as Elsa, as he always took pride in Maddie not dressing up as a princess like a lot of her classmates. This Christmas, it's come to a head as Will spent all of Boxing Day playing the Switch with Adam and Maddie and helping them build Lego while leaving Megan out. Will's offered Megan to play with them, but she wants to play with her new toys and the games that she likes. I played with Megan most of the day, but she asked if she could play her new Barbie game on the Switch for a while with her dad. I told them all to let her have a turn and play the Barbie game with Megan. Adam and Maddie were actually fine and seemed to have fun, but Will kept making fun of the game and telling Megan that other games like Mario Kart were far more fun. I could see Megan losing confidence in wanting to play the game, and she started to say that she didn't want to play anymore. So I pulled Will aside and told him off and said that while he was a great dad to Adam and Maddie, he was being a bad dad to Megan by ignoring her interests. Will was really hurt by being called a bad dad and has been quiet ever since. The kids are now starting to notice that their dad is upset. I'm now wondering if I was too harsh, as he is generally a good dad, and I do know that he loves Megan as much as he loves Adam and Maddie. Honestly, if he's a good dad, then it might be painful, but I think they needed that wake-up call. Hopefully they'll do better and not just poo-poo over all of their interests. Even if they think some Barbie game isn't some game of the year, it's just the playing it with them and enjoying it with them that matters. Our next story is, am I the jerk for shaming my brother for asking me for money? My brother Mike and his wife have 5 boys. One of them is actually our nephew Jesse, who's 8, but my brother and his wife took him in 2 years ago when our other brother passed away. Mike and I got into a huge fight over Jesse. I told him that he and his wife could barely take care of themselves, and I didn't see how they could afford another mouth to feed. I, on the other hand, am single and have enough money to where I could put Jesse in the best private school, play whatever sports he wanted, and he'd live in a really cool house by the beach. We went to court and I had the backing of CPS. I offered to do a joint guardianship of Jesse, but Mike backstabbed me and filed for sole guardianship. He got it because he and his wife already have kids and none of them are screwed up. It did impact my relationship with everyone. I left it in Mike's court with what my role would be since he has custody. There's been next to no contact in a year. Last week, Mike asked me if I could give him a short-term loan because they're drowning financially. There's a medical bill or a car or a house repair bill on top of everything else. I asked him how much he needed to clear everything and start back at zero, and he said $20,000. That is not a lot of money to me, but I shamed him for not thinking about the guardianship through. Now he's paying the piper and asking the brother who he backstabbed for a bailout. He's not the super dad that he pretends to be. Plus, Jesse is bombing in school, and I can only imagine how difficult it must be to get individual detention outside of bath time. Everything else is just family time. I agreed to give him the money on the condition that he and I file for a joint guardianship next year. The goal is for Jesse to live with me. His nasty wife is accusing me of being a bully and a jerk with money. My brother simply thought Jesse would be better off in a house full of kids. After he won guardianship, I expected him to initiate a relationship with me and Jesse since he has custody. That's what I would have done. Absolutely, Jesse would have had a better life with me. He needs individual attention and not group attention. CPS recommends me, not my brother, as guardian. I think the overarching problem here is, what does the kid want? Not once in any of the story did OP ever delve into what the kid wants, what the kid is happy with, just what OP thinks is best. Our next story is, am I the jerk for potentially getting a teacher fired over a joke? My brother, 23, and I, 22-year-old female, have raised our younger siblings together for the past few years. Both our parents have died. The kids' teachers know our situation and are generally pretty good about it, though we still get some comments at the parents' evenings, and correspondence from school is often sent to Mr. and Mrs. our surname. We're used to it and it's usually no big deal. Sometimes it's pretty funny. What I did not find funny was my 14-year-old coming home from school, saying he had a substitute teacher. The teacher works at the same school full-time, but normally doesn't take any of our brother's classes, and as they took the register and saw his surname, the teacher said, "Another flowers in the attic kid. How many more of you are there?" Some of the kids laughed, most apparently didn't really get it, and our brother was embarrassed but also didn't get the reference. A bunch of the kids Googled it in their next break and were laughing about it later on in the day. This teacher's taught our 16-year-old previously for a year, so we had met them multiple times at parents' night. She has since told me that they made comments to her too. When my brother came home and told me what happened and asked me what flowers in the attic is, I was really pissed off. We've had several similar comments before, and I don't find them funny, but it is next level out of order in my opinion to say something like that to a young teenager, let alone in front of classmates. I complained to the school about it the next day. I went in a little strong, but I was pissed. I met with the principal and another senior staff member, waited over an hour for them to be free. I told them at the very least, I don't want any of the kids being taught by that teacher ever again. I think it'll be dealt with after Christmas break, as this was right at the end of their last week. I got the impression that they'll likely be fired. My older brother followed up with an email to back me up and create a record of it. We saw some friends yesterday and told them about the incident. They were horrified, but not at the teacher. They were at me for complaining about it. They said it was a joke, and I may have just cost someone their job. They think I overreacted and that it was pretty funny. They said of course people will make flower in the attic comments because my brother and I are close and affectionate. I don't feel that I should need to say that it would never be anything like that, but to be crystal clear, there is nothing remotely sexual about our relationship. Our 14-year-old has been pretty embarrassed about it ever since. For the first time ever, he asked me not to hug or kiss him when I dropped him off to meet his friends. He's worried about kids bullying him when he goes back to school. I just spoke to 16-year-old. She says she thinks it started after our first parents' night when this teacher met us and saw us interact. Most likely we arrived separately and my brother greeted me with a hug and a kiss on the cheek/forehead. I probably also had my youngest sister on my hip. Scandalous. 16-year-old says that might have given off family vibes. In reality, I was probably stressed as heck because I hate parents' night, and the 16-year-old used to be a terror. Big bro was probably trying and failing to comfort me. A lot of people seem to think the teacher is just a sub. They're a full-time regular teacher at the school. They just subbed for this one class for my 14-year-old. For those that don't know, Flowers in the Attic is a novel. Basically, it's where a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old get locked in some attic together. They grow up, and as they develop a relationship with each other. It's incredibly insensitive of this teacher to say that regardless. And I agree that when somebody's around kids who are going through probably the most developmentally important time of their lives, that somebody like that should not be around them to put them down. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy Am I the Jerk here story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.